5:30, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Our first item is our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Vice Chair, could you read our mission statement?
The mission of the Marshall Public School District is to educate, support, and prepare all learners for success.
Thank you. Moving on to approval of our agenda, do we have a motion?
I'll move. This is Matt.
Second, Sarah.
Any additions? Hearing none, please vote. It is approved. Okay. Moving on to our presentation, will be given by Dion. The mic is yours, sir.
Thank you. You guys see the presentation?
Yes.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. Just want to cover some bullet points before we get into the budget itself. This is definitely a different budget that I've put together than years past with Marshall Public Schools or other districts with everything that's going on. The budget that will be presented tonight was put together as it would be normally in a regular year. With all the unknowns this fall, we didn't feel it was appropriate, whether it's distance learning, hybrid, back in school. With all the unknowns, we felt like it would probably be better to put those adjustments in the revised budget in November, December, once some of those are known at that time. Also wanted to cover a little bit, as you know, we'll be receiving some CARES Act funds. Those projected funds right now, it's $458,492, but we're still learning on how those are broken down with the funds. Portions of those will go to the non-public schools, and those amounts right now aren't known yet. Once we know more information on that, we're kind of hoping applications are supposed to open up on June 30th. The funds are going to run a lot like our title programs, where we receive what we spend. They are giving us some leeway on revising those applications so we know more of what we're going to spend those dollars on. The funds can be spent through September of 2022. So for those reasons, the CARE Act funds won't be included in the preliminary budget, but rather, kind of like we did with our safety grant, we'll include those in the revised budget once we have a better idea of how those will be spent. Also, as we go through the comparison for the 1920 revised budget expenditures and revenue as compared to 2021, some of the line items you'll see may seem kind of skewed. This is because in 1920 we received that $682,360 from MDE for the security grant for middle school and West Side. That was a one-time money budgeted in 1920. So some of those you'll see a reduction in 2021, and that's the main reason for that. And I'll cover that a little bit as we go. Student enrollment, as everybody knows, that's a major drive in what our revenue is arrived at. You'll see that there was a slight decline from 1819 to 1920. A majority of that decline was seen in March through May. We're unsure if that was related to COVID, employment, family situations. On the slide, we're funded on a pupil ADM, or an average membership. So we're still getting a funding for a portion of those students that happened in March and May. So it should be, that shouldn't be a big effect for 1920. Then for 2021, we are showing another increase from the 1920 numbers of 29 students projection. And just kind of a side note, as you look at the 1920 numbers going back 10 years, or the projected for 2021 going back 10 years, that's still a 305 student increase over the last 10 years, which I think we've talked about and seen over the years with a steady increase. So another factor in the enrollment or in our funding is the open enrollment. The top graph or the top table shows the students that open enrolled into Marshall Public Schools. We had 246 over the course of the school year. That graph does not include Maytech. We had 30 students over the course of the school year that enrolled into Marshall Public Schools that were not residents. Students that were residents that open enrolled outside of Marshall's public schools, we had a total of 259 over the course of the school year. We've talked about this in previous years, and we'll continue to monitor that and try to figure out, how we can keep some of those resident students into our district. This slide shows the comparison in previous years for free and reduced. Free and reduced has increased a little bit over last year compared to 17-18, which was 45.8%. We're now at 47.1%. Jill has done a great job finding different ways to communicate with parents to make sure whoever's eligible, we get, we have them fill out the applications. It's important because it's obviously it's a benefit to the family, but it's also a benefit to the district because our title and compensatory and other funding is free and reduced numbers drive some of that in the calculations. Special ed, you can see we're still consistently growing in our special education department and students that are eligible for service. 17-18, we had 503. That grew to 541 in 18-19, and 19-20, we're looking at about 582 students. Minority student demographic. Tricia puts this together. It's kind of cool to look at. The big table on top is the number of, that's actually just the home language spoken in the schools. At the bottom, you'll see the actual number of students that participated in our EL programs. 17-18, we reported 412 students. 2018, we were at 434 as receiving EL services. In 1920, it was reported that 429 were receiving services. So that number held pretty steady from the previous year. Each year we show the staffing to class size ratios. As you guys are well aware of, back in 2018, the school board updated the class size target and stress that it's the target of maintaining the class size, the student to staff ratio. Looking at K through 4, all those for using next year's projections for 2021 hold pretty steady and at or under. The only one that is a little bit over is our kindergarten section. And as we talk about that each year, we have kindergarten aides in each of those sections to help out with that number. 5th through 8th grade, those numbers are holding steady also. We have a couple of larger class sizes going through 6th and 7th grade this year. 7th grade is just 1.14 over the 26 class size target, but the other ones fall on or under. The next slide is for the high school and special ed, just showing you what the class size targets are. We don't break those down because those vary. Obviously, the high school with the block system and with the different the different special ed categories. So we'll get into the general fund, the actual budget portion. This slide shows you the comparison of the 1920 general fund revenue that was budgeted compared to what's being budgeted in 2021. A few lines I want to bring your attention to are general ed aid, which, you know, from legislature went up, is projected to go up 2%, which is $139 per student or pupil. That's equivalent of $343,191. Plus, we're projecting a small increase over the enrollment this year to next year. Special ed line, you'll also see an increase there. Special ed is calculated using the MDE special ed revenue module. And we also look at past increases to try and get an average of what the increases have been over the years. As you can see in special ed expenditures, as we see an increase in special ed expenditures, we should also see an increase in the revenue too. And in Title III, it shows a small decrease. We are funded in 2021. We are actually receiving about $4,439 more. We spent some of our carryover in 1920, so that's why it's showing a small decrease there for our Title III numbers. A few other lines to point out: the Safe Schools one-time revenue of $86,265 that we received in 1920. Again, that's one time, so we won't be receiving that in 2021. And then, as mentioned prior, that middle school West Side Safety Grant, you see a line item there for $682,360. That was revenue received in 1920 one time. You won't see that in the 2021 line. With the overall revenue, that's showing a $19,108 reduction in last year. But if you take out that one-time Safe School and Safety Grant amounts, we're actually showing about a $749,517 increase in our revenue. So just wanted to point that out because those two grants kind of skew when you do the comparison between the two. General fund expenditures. As you know, salary and benefits are a majority of any school's expenditures. There's many factors that cause the salary and benefits to fluctuate. Salary changes come with negotiations, change in staffs, approved additions or reductions. This year, one of the additions in our salary and benefits, we added Jackie to our special ed director as a Marshall Public School employee, which was previously contracted through SWWC. So that was budgeted prior in our purchases services and now moves into our salary and benefits. Benefits change also with negotiations. And as you know, TRA has an increase each year, I think over the next couple of years still, and that is a 0.21% increase over last year. So as you look at the salary and benefit graphs, they're pretty consistent over the last 6 years. And I'll talk a little more about the salary or the supplies, purchase services, and expenditures in the next slide. So when it comes to the purchase services, again, a majority of that are going to be a couple of reasons. One is moving Jackie from contracted services to salary and benefits. So you're going to see a reduction there. And then also that middle school West Side Safety Grant, there was about $325,000 in purchase services that were budgeted in 1920 that won't be budgeted in 2021. Supplies, you're seeing a slight decrease in that. A small portion of that was the security grant, about $12,000. But we are watching our spending when it comes to supplies and materials. And then also capital expenditures. You're showing a decrease from 1920 to 2021 of 371, 293,000, a little over 293,000 of that was due to the security grant. And then we also have in 2021, our tech lease payments are actually about $67,000 lower in 2021 than they were in 1920. So again, that shows a reduction in spending when you take some of those factors out. It moves it a little bit. So between the preliminary budget for 2021, budgeted revenue of $31,035,913 compared to the preliminary 2021 budget of expenditures of $31,617,258. Overall general fund, we're looking at about $581,345 in deficit spending in 2021. Are there any questions on the general fund before I move on? No? Okay. Feel free to interrupt me if you do. Food service, not a lot of change there. In the expenditures, projected the increase in the food and milk as it has been in prior years. Not taking a lot again into account for this fall. I think our food expenditures in March through May somewhat evened out of the revenue expenditures that would have if we're in school on different levels, but equaled out. The one factor that I did include in the 2021 expenditures was, if you see under payroll indirect costs, a $33,000 increase. That is for the material distribution for July. The employees that we will have out doing food service, food distribution in July that are Marshall Public Schools that we typically wouldn't have had if we were serving in the school. It is our hopes that, and there are different sections of the CARES Act funds that we would be able to put that in our application for reimbursement. Contracted services, as you can see, falls right in line with previous years. Food service revenue, there again, not a whole lot of movement, but I did do some decreases when it comes to our state and our sales. So depending on how this fall turns out, we'll adjust that more when it comes to the November-December revised budget. Summer food program revenue, which is federal funded, you'll see an increase in that line there. What we did was we used the average of what the revenue was from April and May. That we did the full month of material distribution and used that for July. 138,000 might seem like a lot, but when you compare that to a regular month of school when we're in session, our revenue per month's a little over $213,000. So just to kind of give you a comparison there. With all of that, with expenditures and revenue, we're still projecting an excess in food service funds of $9,920. And below you can see a graph of the food service expenditures and food service revenue comparison with prior years. And we've been fortunate enough with the help of Taher and Mark Broderson and Lori and their staff to keep those in line. Transportation fund, not a big swing in transportation expenditures and revenue as compared to 1920. Our contracted services that we have contracted through next year, that calculates in the contracted services increase over last year. So you can see it's $31,830. Unfortunately, the trend of transportation remains the same, where the expenditures are outweighing the revenue that we receive. Overall, we're showing a deficit spend in transportation of about $72,734. We're continuing to look for ways to close that gap, but as you see, the trends are pretty consistent over the previous years. But like I said, we'll work with Southwest Coaches in that and try to find different ways to help close that gap. Again, a lot depends on this fall of what happens. Community services, preliminary budget for community services doesn't show a lot of movement. Is expected over, and actually the expenditures show a decrease of $5,381. Revenue isn't showing a lot of change either, both in the expenditures and the revenue. The biggest change would be with ABE. The revenue side of things, this would be due to some of their grants that were received in 1920 or prior have been spent down. The good news is overall for the community service fund, we're expecting about a $43,000, $94 surplus in that fund. Capital outlay, excuse me. We're needing to reduce our spending a little bit, or our expenditures from 1920 to 2021, stay in line with the revenue that we're receiving. As you can see in 17-18 and 18-19, there were a couple of projects that we had that the expenditures spent down some of that fund balance. And so we're looking at trying to keep those expenditures for 2021 in line with the revenue and build up that capital expenditure fund balance again. So you'll see a decrease in the expenditures there. The LTFM, we have a good fund balance. So we're able to spend a little more than the revenue coming in. We've talked quite a bit about the LTFM projects that we have and addressing those sooner than later. So we're looking at spending that down a little bit. Our LTFM revenue for 2021 is showing about $457,930 down from previous year. That is due to the roofing project, and that revenue, we're not actually losing that revenue. It's just shifting from capital outlay funds to debt service because we have the LTFM bond to pay for the roofing project. Debt service. We're showing an increase to both the expenditures and revenue and debt service. That's mainly with the addition of the building referendum and the LTFM bond premium and interest that I was just talking about for the roofing project. See an increase in the expenditures of a little over $1 million and our levy revenue increasing about $1.2 million for next year or for 2021. The OPEB bond, you'll see the expenditures and revenue zeroed out for 2021. That's because that was settled in 1920, so that'll be zeroed out going forward. And I apologize for how small the numbers are here, but the top orange section was actually and I forgot to put it in there, that was the preliminary budget that was done back in February. The blue section, the blue table is the preliminary budget I just presented now. A couple of the biggest movements you'll see from the preliminary budget back in February was we had projected about a $251,000 deficit spend in general fund. With the movement in the revenue, we're projecting that at around $581,345 for 2021 deficit spending. The other one you'll see is capital outlay. We were projecting about $514,000, and now it's only about $213,000. That's again with trying to watch our spending in the capital outlay portion, and then also shifting some of those LTFM funds. So with that, I would open it up to any questions you might have.
Board members, any questions? Thank you, Dion.
Thank you.
Moving on to our consent agenda. Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
I'll second this, Bill.
Please vote. It is approved.
20 MHS students enrolled in those courses. And then I'll just touch on some information in Jeremy's report, but I just shared some information about the return to school or return to learn scenarios from what we've been hearing from the Department of Education. In Tiffany's report, because of Pathway 2 leftover funding, we will be able to offer a small summer school program for students from free and reduced lunch status for 4-year-olds going into kindergarten, or next year 5-year-olds going into kindergarten. Darcy's report, they ended the school year, teachers did, by doing driveway visits to their students and delivering a bag of educational materials to help with summer learning. And then the final 2 days of the year for staff were primarily spent on what I would say would be transition plans for next year. Hopefully just helping next year's teachers kind of pick up where those kids left off this year in distance learning. In Eric's report for Westside, during distance learning, so the 9 weeks of distance learning that we had, Westside students had a work completion percentage of over 92%. So I thought that that was pretty good. And then Eric also provided updates on the 3 new personnel hires for a nursing position, a 4th grade teaching position, and a special education teaching position. In Brian's report, he did a really nice job of putting together sort of a thank you to a variety of organizations and entities in our community who help provide support in different ways for the virtual graduation ceremony. And then Brian also shared that the Pride in the Tiger Senior Scholarship virtual banquet, there were $132,660 and 143 scholarships that were given out to seniors. So as usual, thank you to the Pride in the Tiger Foundation for everything they do, including the senior scholarships. In Amanda Peterson's report, she indicated that credit recovery started today, so we'll see how that is going. Targeted services summer programming begins on July 6th, and I think she previously shared, but she again shared that the child care center number of children has increased, which is a good thing. In Bruce's report, facilities reopened today for things like weightlifting and mini camps and things like that. We do have a pretty solid, I believe, set of guidelines and protocols or expectations in place. So we'll see how they go the first few days and make any adjustments that we need to. And then I'd also encourage you to mark your calendars for Saturday, October 3rd, which is scheduled to be the M Club Athletic Hall of Fame banquet. In Beth's report, she shared that access scores from this year, so scores and gains made by our EL students, were positive. We definitely look for those, and I believe our access scores were the only state assessments that we were able to complete during the school closure. Jeremy's report includes some information on return to learn planning for the fall. He's planning to, or already has put together, a committee that will be working on this as they plan for either hybrid, face-to-face, and I'll say or distance learning, because last week in a virtual conference call, the Department of Education encouraged us to prepare for all 3 scenarios, not knowing what the fall would look like, and they commented that it is possible we could utilize all 3 of those scenarios in the 2020-2021 school year. They will let us know, I believe, on July 27th or before what we should plan for fall school scenarios. And then Jeremy also shared that the Q-comp calculations for this year ended up being between 97 and 100%. And in Jackie's report, she shared specific information about extended school year summer programming. 40 of the 50 ESY students will be participating. It is distance learning, but 80% of our students will be participating. And then Jackie also shared that our district was in full compliance on this year's due process monitoring, which is an accomplishment in itself because typically the Department of Education will find something during that monitoring. So kudos to Jackie and the special education staff. And I'll turn it over to Dion.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I know you guys have heard me talk a lot, but I just want to cover a few things on mine that are pretty important. You guys know that we've been working with ICS on the LTFM projects and getting together a plan with that. We also brought in Ellers Financial to try and help us find ways to fund some of those projects outside of our LTFM funds. Since you guys know the costs outweigh the LTFM levy and the revenue that we receive. So we're looking at possibly facility maintenance and tax abatement bonds be issued for the indoor air quality portions of our LTFM projects and some of our parking lot projects. We're working with ICS to update some of those estimates and due to the flexibility of the structure of our existing debt, we'd be able to structure the proposed bonds issued and working with Ellers, there'd be no tax increase for our future debt service levies, and we'd also be able to maintain the step down of the future like we had planned with our bond referendum. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on that. In July, at the July 20th meeting, Ellers will be presenting what that looks like, the timeline. I'll see if we can also get ICS and to help to present some of those projects. Like I said, it'd be mainly our indoor air quality and our parking lot projects to try and knock off some of the bigger amount ones so we can attend and keep our facilities up to date. So we'll be introducing some of those some of those resolutions to the bond to consider at the next board meeting. Had a couple of questions on PPE and cleaning for this fall with not knowing what to do, but also with the timeline of being able to order things. What are we doing so we're not caught when it comes to this fall? Warren, Jill, and I have been working with a company called Hillard. They're part of the cooperative purchasing program. And they actually came in and did a study on all of our classrooms and located in different rooms. So we're putting together a plan to order some of that PPE and cleaning supplies now. Most of what we're ordering, we'd be able to use down the road anyway, like hand sanitizer, gloves, spray bottles, some of those cleaners. Our plan right now is to put hand sanitizer dispensers in all classrooms that don't have sinks in them, and then also taking into account any places that we already have soap with the increased usage of those. We are planning to order some cloth masks for staff, as well as gloves for staff cleaning, not just our custodial, but regular staff will have to be cleaning. We're going to make sure we have enough spray bottles on hand, paper towels, but we'll keep you guys updated on that. But I just wanted to let you guys know we're not going to wait till this fall to order, because a lot of things are 2 to 3 weeks to 2 to 3 months. And what we did is we're looking at ordering a 90-day supply. And that way, as things are used, we can order, and we're 2 to 3 months ahead of things. Also in my report is the summer food program. As you guys know, we continued that starting June 8th, and I just updated the numbers today. 2018, I don't have the 2019 numbers, but I do believe 2019 was actually less than 2018. In 2018, we had served 6,677 lunches over the course of the whole summer for our summer food program. So far, from last Monday to this Monday, we've served 5,754 lunches and breakfasts. So I believe the meal distribution is definitely working, and we should definitely outweigh or outserve the number that we did in a whole year summer compared to probably 2 weeks. And then last thing, wanted to share the weekly update. I believe you guys received the weekly updates from ICS, but wanted to share that on the board report so the public can see that too. Just some different pictures of the different sites. Parkside is coming along very nicely. They actually had the plumbing is completed and inspected. They're backfilling that, and I believe this week, either today or tomorrow, they're going to be pouring the cement over that. This week they're going to start to install some of the steel studs outside. And then the new elementary, they have the footings dug, and they started pouring some of those footings late last week, and will continue to pour the footings in this week. So it's pretty exciting. Like Sarah said, you're seeing a lot of production going on in both of those projects.
Thank you, Dion. Any questions for Dion? Move on to our first review of policies 201 through 205. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, we'll move on to our action items. Our first one is approval of the 2020-2021 budget. Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
I'll second.
It's open for discussion. Hearing no discussion, please vote. It is approved. Our next action item is approval of the beverage contract for 2020 through 2025. Do we have a motion? Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I just want to bring up, we were with Pepsi previous 5 years. We did an RFP, and Coke came in with a little better offer to our Tiger Sports, and also the comparison between the commission to the cost was very comparable to Pepsi. So we are recommending that we go with Viking Coca-Cola for the 5-year contract.
Questions? Hearing none, please vote. It is approved. Approval of the QComp annual report for 2019-20. Motion to approve. Do we have a okay. Bill seconded. Any questions?
Just a quick comment that this is a report that's approved every year, required as part of our QComp plan.
Very good. We'll vote, please. It is approved. Approval of the 2020-21 literacy plan. Need a motion?
So move.
And I'll second. Any discussion?
Kind of a similar approval or agenda item. This will need to be posted on our website, I believe, and just something that we follow closely each year.
Very good. We'll vote, please. And it is approved. Before we adjourn, I'd like to thank our student board reps. They did a fine job, and hope they all come back next year. Looking forward to a new year. And I'd like to take a moment to thank Mr. Monkson for 6 years of service to our district. I think it was a good move to have you here. The district grew a lot. We all grew a lot, and you also gained a family. So it was a good move for you too.
Absolutely, I appreciate that.
I'll end the meeting. Thank you.